Sure. Good afternoon. Thanks for the invitation and the opportunity to present really what is great news, I think, after all the problems and challenges and complexities we've talked about. Maybe as a bit of a background, let me take you back to 2008 when the government, under the leadership of Richard Perry-Jones, invited all the CEOs of the car companies to what was called the new Automotive Innovation and Growth Team, where we sat down at the dawn of the global financial crisis to work out, can we sustain a car industry in Britain? Because at the time, when we looked at economic indicators of employment, gross value added, it was all heading south. And in fact, if you extrapolated data for employment, for example, at the time, the last person to switch the lights off in the UK car industry would have left by 2025. So that was the situation that we were in 2008, and that led to the establishment of the Automotive Council and, of course, of the supply chain group. Now, that's sort of history by now, and a lot of great work has been done by SMMT and, of course, the AIO since, including the Meet the Buyer events and the many initiatives that have taken place to successfully bring investment into the UK. But as Deming always said, in God we trust, all others must bring data. We should also measure the success. So we've done 3 rounds of trying to assess what is the content that is actually bought by the UK car industry from UK suppliers in terms of purchasing volume. And I think you see the data up here. In 2011, we came in at 36%, which is considerably below competitor nations such as France and Germany, where you'd expect something like 60 to 65%. But thanks to the great work that has been going on, this went up to 41% in 2015, and the latest data that we've just completed, it went up to 44%. So we are very much on the right track, and I think it's a great case to show what can be done if government and industry pull together at a pre-competitive level, get into one room, talk about common problems and common solutions. And that's why I'm very happy to share this good news with you.
Thank you very much, Matthias. Mike, let's bring you in here. Why don't you tell us, is this on? Sorry. Why don't you tell us what you're seeing from the council's point of view?
Okay, so the Automotive Investment Organisation that Matthias spoke about is one of a number of strategic initiatives that the Automotive Council took back in starting in 2008. And the idea was that there was a big opportunity to reshore a lot of the components that were being brought in from overseas to the UK to support the growth of the OEMs in the UK. And all the OEMs on the council said, look, we need a strategic, sustained effort to grow the supply chain in the UK so that we can have more choices and more opportunity to source product from the UK. And the unit that I chair came into existence just under 5 years ago. It's quite unique in that it's a government business partnership, so we're staffed by both civil servants and business specialists. We still talk to each other, which is good. But I think the testament is in our contribution, and it's not just us. There's many other stakeholders to this result. So Matthias talked about the hollowing out. We've definitely turned the battleship around. There's still a lot more that we can do, and we still have a long-term aspiration to get up to the sorts of levels that Germany and France and other auto centres deliver. But it's a good result thus far. The other piece that I'd reference is part of our job is explaining to potential overseas investors who want to invest in the UK to help boost the supply chain capability what actually is going on in the UK auto sector. And I call it the bandwidth. Everything from conventional component suppliers to manufacturers right the way through to, we heard a lot this morning about the emerging technologies of connected cars, autonomous vehicles, electric vehicles, the electrification of powertrain. And when we explain this fantastic capability that we have, not only in terms of the supply chain, but also the R&D capability that we have in the UK, there is a lot of interest for companies to come and start, not only doing their R&D here, but also thinking about manufacturing and supplying the UK auto industry. And whether it's the Centre for Connected Cars and Autonomous Vehicles, or the Advanced Propulsion Centre, or the Office for Low Emission Vehicles, and of course latterly in the last, just before the election, there was the Faraday battery production challenge launched by the government. It just demonstrates the huge bandwidth that we have, and our job is to make sure that potential investors understand that and see the UK as a great place to come and source their business.
Okay, thanks, Mike. I think the most reassuring thing is that business can talk to civil servants out of that, from my point of view. But bringing business in, Simon from LVS.
Hi, so I'd like to try and give a balanced view from an optimistic side of things. As MD of a relatively small Tier 2 business, we've been trying probably for 3 to 4 years to grow our business through reshoring, particularly from Eastern and mainland Europe, which up until probably September last year was very, very difficult. Struggle for traction, struggle for momentum, came across every barrier possible. Post-Brexit and the sort of 3 months after that, my phone started ringing and ringing quite profusely on the basis that everybody suddenly said, we have to do something. There was a number of factors on that. One is obviously the challenges relating to the Forex issues, sterling devaluation, etc., etc. Secondly was I started hearing about WTO and the tariffs. So I think we actually got some momentum before most other people jumped onto this position that the OEMs need to start considering the UK content. We have been very successful to date, and at this point in time, I would suggest if everything that we have around us at the moment, I would double the size of my business in the next 18 months. I probably can't take on all those opportunities through skills, funding, space, capital equipment, all sorts of other challenges I have. But I think that's the thing that I wanted to try and get across today is as a privately owned business, the challenges laid down to us effectively, no different to it was in 2008 to survive a financial crisis. This is similar to those sort of scenarios. We can sit on our hands, we can say what's going to happen. We have 18 months to take up this traction and momentum that's around from the OEMs at the moment to tier ones, to actually take those challenges on, try and say that we can be more than 44%. I don't think in that period of time, or I think we talked earlier about we could get to 60% in 10 years. I think we could do that before that if we all actually accepted the challenge. We have to accept also that we have to change perceptions. And a lot of people feel that there isn't the skills, there isn't the talent, there isn't the old historical technologies or processes left in the UK. And I don't want to steal somebody else's thunder here, but we are actually seeing these technologies and these processes coming back into the UK. I believe with the opportunities we have in competing now with Central Europe as opposed to the Far East, that even if we did have punitive tariffs put onto us, with our cost base being different to that in France and Germany, that we can mitigate those tariffs by way of being competitive internally.
That's some fighting talk there, Simon, on the target of 60%. Mark, do you agree?
Well, I'm the grumpy face, aren't I guess?
Well, I wouldn't like to say so, but
I just think it's going to be really hard to get to that because I think we're underestimating the raw materials. You know, even basic polymers for plastics, you know, but they're not in the UK anymore. So I think we've got a massive challenge in raw materials. You know, even with steel, aluminium, we've got some really, really big raw material issues before we even talk about components.
so there seems to be a problem before we even think about the possibilities and
I'm
changes
talking about
that
the
we're
actual
facing.
content. Are we talking about really, you know, the figures are right and it's great, and there is, our business has grown organically because of the growth. So there is been growth in the UK, but I'm saying to really bring parts back in-house, truly in-house, you know, we've got some fundamental bridges to get over first.
It's a very downbeat message, and I think what we've been hearing today, especially this morning, there is danger, but as Simon said, there is opportunity in that if it's handled correctly. But I don't want to steer it too much onto Brexit because, quite frankly, I think everybody's heard enough about that, and we will hear enough about that in the future.
No, I think it can be, okay, it can be downbeat. It feels downbeat at the moment, and it's only downbeat because I'm not seeing or hearing anything from the government that they're going to carry on this positive momentum. You know, this is the first time, I won't tell how old I am, but that I've seen an election with so much rhetoric and rather than real clear facts. If we do this, this is what Brexit's going to do, this is what's going to happen. The reason why I say it that way, I've got to put it into context. I'm an investor, but I have obviously large backers behind me. We've grown our business from 60 million to 190 in 3 years. We're on a very clear path because the UK has been a fantastic place for investors, even for America, to say, yes, Mark, we're going to back this. We're going to back an automotive supply chain company because they could see the companies growing, you know, Nissan, BMW, JLR. It's been so positive, and we're seeing that from the numbers. So I think we've gone from such a positive automotive sector to now, you know, dare I say it, I'm getting the opposite phone calls. I'm getting investors saying, Mark, what do you think about Brexit? Oh, you know, can we talk about something else for 5 minutes? You know, what about this new job we just won from Ford? No, what about Brexit? What are we going to do about retooling? Are we going to go to France or England? So if we get it right, it could be positive. All I'm saying is people outside the UK looking in are very confused and saying, what the heck's going to happen, Mark?
So
it could be positive, that's what I'm trying to say.
it could be positive.
It could be positive.
But it's all about the messaging, you're saying.
It could be positive.
Okay, well, trying to be upbeat before we all go jump in the Thames and not just to cool off.
Oh, no, we definitely won't do that.
Okay. What signs are you seeing, if any, of positivity? I mean, is there anything that's really making you think the government, it may be spouting rhetoric, but is there anything coming out of it that you think they understand, they're hearing the industry's message?
No, I think the industry has been really, really positive. We're seeing new RFQs, we're seeing, you know, it's not rhetoric about wanting to supply and buy from the UK. That's definitely there. But what I'm not hearing, I've not heard anything positive yet. I'll just give you 3 clear examples if you don't mind. We're trying to grow a business in the Midlands. Honestly, I've seen so many warehouses. And you say to a landlord, I want to dig a big hole to put an 800-ton press in it. They look at you as if some sort of alien. And who do you go to get government help to try and, you know, to retool?
But why are they confused?
Because I think, I do generally think a lot of business people and property owners are confused about what's going to happen with Brexit. Why should I convert a warehouse to a manufacturing business when you might pull out if Brexit happens? I think we've thrown in so much uncertainty without real facts and data. It's the first time I've gone, what is it really going to mean? I guess I'm tired of saying soft Brexit, hard Brexit, medium Brexit. I've had to explain to a group of American investors in Florida, what do I think hard Brexit means? You know, come on, we've heard some really good stuff today, and I was quite interested in the economical side, because you forget the World Trade Organization, you forget, you know, we've got to barter with some very strong nations.
I shudder to say this, but you said you had 3 examples.
Oh, sorry.
Does the room want to hear the other two, or can we?
Shall I go?
Should we skip to something?
It could be really positive.
Well, let's hear it. Let's hear it.
You know, it could be.
I'm braced.
We're talking about free movement of people. Fact. We've got some workers that we need running some very sophisticated machine tools that have asked, can we become contractors? What do you want to be contractors for? Well, we don't know what's going to happen, and there's no point in paying national insurance and all that stuff because, we don't know what's going to happen. So we're just getting, we're hearing lots of good stuff and good, things in the sky, but down here, we're trying to grow a business from 190, our target's to 500 million. So we need people, we need the skills, we need we've got to have free movement of people. We're not going to find those engineers. We've got to make a decision. Manchester, Birmingham, where's the sites? Where's the manufacturing sites now? So we've got some tooling. Are we really going to get UK manufactured tooling, or have we got to carry on buying tooling from Europe? I'd rather buy tooling locally, local jobs, of course we would. But is there going to be a clear department or government department that's going to say, with Brexit, we want to grow the economy? Because, listen, we've had a great 3 years, a fantastic 3 years. It's been, who would have thought 3 years ago, getting some investors to say, let's invest in the UK and grow an automotive supply chain business? Yes, Mark, here's 50 million quid.
Mark, I don't wish to sound to spoil your fun, but or be too Eeyore-ish, but I'm going to try and see if anybody's got a more sunny view to reflect the weather. Mike.
Well, I think the first thing is Mark and I need to sit down afterwards because, look, Brexit is definitely a contextual thing that's out there that's affecting everybody's day-to-day business discussions. And I would guess everybody in the room who's in the supply chain, the sorts of questions that Mark's been talking about have been on the agenda, and my team faces them all the time. But I think if I could take a step back, firstly, the automotive strategy for the UK, regardless of what happens in Brexit, is set by, as Matthias said, by the Automotive Council, which is this enduring relationship between government. It's chaired by the Secretary of State, currently Greg Clark for BEIS, and a senior industry leader, currently Nigel Steen from GKN. All the OEMs and major suppliers are involved in the council. And they set the strategic direction to make sure that the UK automotive sector not only maintains its competitiveness, but it improves its capability and its competence. And one of the reasons we've had success in companies investing in supply chain companies investing in the UK is because they see that overarching strategy and commitment to making sure that the automotive sector is a significant player in the UK economy. And Matthias talked about percentages, but let's talk about the value. That value moving from 36% to 44% off a higher drawdown from the UK OEMs is worth something like 3 billion to the UK economy. This is not on the fringes. It's a significant state, and we're having people making those commitments post the referendum vote. So
it's not all bad news. We've got to say. Simon, you talked about your phone ringing off the hook, and you can't meet the demand.
Yeah, it's very true. And effectively, all of those really are coming from Germany and France, and they're looking at reshoring product from Germany, France, and Czech Republic. We have actually supported some activities on this, and as a consequence of this, we are now actually exporting these products as well. So we're now supplying these parts because they're common part numbers to China, to back into the Czech Republic. So government rhetoric is we're open for business for exporting, and Britain's great from that, but we perhaps ought to look, don't want to be naive, but also look inwardly as well. And there's perhaps lower hanging fruit in front of you on your doorstep. And perhaps you go after that first, and then you have your export opportunities that might well come off the back of those.
So just give me some examples of the lower hanging fruit that's internal then, or domestic, I should say.
Plants that are on my doorstep, and I mean literally doorstep, within 3, 4, 5 mile radiuses, that are importing, as I said, probably as much as 100% of my turnover from the Czech Republic and from Germany every single day. So they've got lorries coming in every single day for product that they're having to then warehouse. They're filling a lorry based on contractual commitments as opposed to what is actually scheduled and required. We've changed their supply chain. We're now doing line-side deliveries, reduce their inventory. We've managed to be cost competitive. You take UK labour rates versus the French and German labour rates, and we're very competitive. Take the logistics costs, the actual storage costs, the fallout from storage. All these are A-phase parts. The storage costs, the fallout they have from that is massive. Factor all that in, and all of a sudden you've got a supplier right on your doorstep who can deliver you a better product at a better price point, and you're actually adhering to what your OEM is requesting.
Matthias, you've looked at the figures and done the research 3 times now. What Simon was just saying, that there are these opportunities, looking back over previous studies, I mean, can you see how the world, or I should say the UK has changed, the market has changed in light of Simon's comments?
Sure. I mean, generally, I think the discussion starts at the wrong point, and people look at what is the cost of one labour hour in manufacturing in a country. And that is, as you just said, obviously the totally wrong point to start, because you need to look at productivity-adjusted labour cost in the context of the total cost for that product, from start to delivery to the customer. That includes logistics and all the handling you were describing. So in that sense, I would agree that the UK is far more competitive on a total cost basis, and we've argued this many times before, than it gives itself credit for. The second point I wanted to make, just to Mark's earlier point, we have seen some industries go from the UK altogether. That is, the raw materials you mentioned. That is also high volume electronics, for example, and that's also the heavy end of metal processing, such as forging, for example. So those are examples where we've seen a decline. Getting those back is a different problem to growing what we already have. And as part of the Auto Council, we've done the work. You could buy 80% of the components needed for a vehicle in the UK today. That's not to say that every source is competitive, but in principle, 80% of those components are available. And then, of course, that brings the challenge, how do we help those suppliers to become, gain the scale and the skills and the capabilities to compete?
Matthias, Mark seemed to be somewhat sceptical about the idea of 80% of the components could be provided domestically.
No, I think it could. The point I'm making is probably didn't do a good job. That I think we've had such a great 3 years growing our businesses, and it's been a great climate. And onshoring was started. You've read all the press that it's real that the car companies do want to buy locally. It's just that, I've seen as a tier 1, we've been moving up slowly, tier 3, tier 2, and now as a tier 1. You've got globalisation, but with the, local. Mm-hmm. They want a global supply, they want the quality, they want to make sure if it's a handbrake, it's the same handbrake in a transit van in Turkey, in Russia, and the UK. So they want the quality, but they want it also localised. So, of course, there's an opportunity. My message is that not too negative. I just hope the government really do listen and try and keep that momentum going. So I don't want to be all negative. I think there is an opportunity, but I'm not hearing much from the government for the small to medium-sized SMEs, what is going to be really, really available to help them carry on growing.
Oh, Mike, you're talking to civil servants, thankfully. What is the message that you've got to take to them to get to this idealised but probably unattainable 80%? I mean, let's stick to what might be achievable and match
I don't think Matthias was saying 80% sourcing. He was saying there's a list of commodities.
Yeah.
So Well, I think there are a couple of things. Firstly, in terms of international competitiveness and supplying OEMs who are based in the UK, we've got to be really clear. Those OEMs are going to have choices, and they will routinely benchmark those component sources across the whole world. That is the nature of the automotive business around the world. So one advantage of us improving the competitiveness of the supply chain is we become more internationally competitive, and we can not only source components to our UK-based manufacturers, but we can become increasingly competitive and export more to other OEMs based overseas. So to look at it just in the isolation of a UK-based OEM just buying components from a UK-based supply chain because they're in the UK, I think is the wrong message. Whatever happens, you have to be internationally competitive because they have their sourcing competition.
So no pride in the home market. You've just got to be good enough to deliver.
Well, everybody in this room knows. I mean, the fantastic thing about the automotive sector, it is a truly global industry. And every time little things are moving, there's nudges going on all over the world in terms of competitiveness. And you have to be competitive to survive and compete and thrive in the industry. So just buying on the basis that it's made in the UK, I don't know many OEMs who will make that decision. Adjacency is becoming increasingly important because of the logistics costs. So there are a number of factors that are coming into play. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the issues that are facing the supply chain are no different to the rest of the advanced manufacturing sector in the UK. So, we're doing a lot of work with a number of stakeholders, both the OEMs, suppliers, and universities on things like skills and technology capability, because that's a really important aspect of how a supply chain develops its capability. We're looking at how we can help the supply chain become even more productive and competitive, because the world will keep moving. And right now we've got a bit of a currency benefit, but in the long term, who knows where currencies are going to be. So you have to be productive in that sense. But I think the third thing is we've got to have some confidence in our capability. The UK auto industry nearly went out of business a couple of decades ago, but survived because basically there was a lot of really good investment that came in from overseas. But it's boosted our capability in design, engineering, new technologies. This country, the UK, is one of the very few in the world where you can actually drive an autonomous vehicle right now, as long as you meet some insurance criteria, without any need for permissions. We have a fantastic catapult network that's been built up. So, it's a very, very broad, technically capable sector that can go out and compete in the world. And we just need to make sure that we do more to encourage investment and activity.
Matthias, you said something at the very start, and I don't wish to be negative, but the point you made was that earlier research suggested that the last company would leave, the UK automotive company would leave in 2025. Obviously, that's been arrested.
Yes.
It's turned round. Things are looking better, thankfully, and looking very bright in many areas, with a few clouds on the horizon. We also mentioned briefly, we touched on the hollowing out of UK industry. I mean, I think this is for everybody, where are the specific opportunities? Where could we play to our strengths?
Well, I think the specific opportunities come generally with new vehicles that UK plants bid for. When they're awarded, then of course that brings the opportunity to use that volume to increase the existing supplier base. Don't forget, the average supplier has between 4 and 5 customers, and that scale is needed for the supplier to compete globally. So you can't just be, it's much more difficult to be just a supplier to OEM A or B. So I think the opportunities are continuous as new models are being awarded to UK plants. and that's what we need to fight for.
Okay, and Mike, what about you? Specific technologies and areas? Are you seeing similar things to Matthias, or are there any examples you'd like to draw out?
Well, I think there are, and we've had some great successes. It's in the report. It quotes 3 companies who, in the last 12 months, have made significant investments in the UK on what I may say is more traditional automotive components. But in addition to that, we are seeing very strong evidence that companies are starting to look at the UK, even London, as a centre for the mobility expertise. Companies have trawled around the world and looked at the kind of ecosystem that's available to develop their autonomous vehicle packages or their connected packages or their autonomous vehicle capability and their mobility programs. And they've decided, in one case, London is the place to be, having looked at a number of cities around the world. So that's right at the other end of the spectrum. Now, there'll be a period of R&D where we won't see much come out of that. But once the R&D is established, then it flows and other activities flow out of that in terms of component manufacture or high-tech manufacture. But the other, we sometimes walk past our real strengths, and we tend to forget about Formula One. It's a fantastic industry in terms of innovation, technology design. Talking about SMEs and smaller companies, the tale of companies that actively participate in the Formula One development is literally thousands. And, even German manufacturers who win Formula One championships have their engine designed here in the UK, because that's where the capability and the competence is to design a world-class engine that wins in Formula One. Formula E, at the other end of the spectrum, has based itself in the UK to generate the new technologies. So, as I said earlier, this huge bandwidth of capability is something that we can actively develop.
So there is pent-up demand, it would seem. There is the capability, we've got the range, we've got everything that we need to increase the level of content. Speaking to 2 people who were there to supply these parts, what specific measures would you like to see, excluding Brexit, thank you, but what specific measures would you like to see to allow you to really get stuck into the market and really, really take a bigger chunk of it? Perhaps Mark?
Yeah, I just think, like I said, it's difficult not to be negative. I don't want to get into Brexit again. It's just the nervousness. If you look at, there's lots of opportunities. Everyone talks about the new cars. They are being developed. Obviously, you've got the Tesla in America. That could be an opportunity. But if you look here, there's a great small electrical car built up in Sunderland, and we're trying to quote for new parts of that, the new battery pack.
Well, I believe they're in the room, but
yes.
I'll save the pitch to afterwards.
No, but that's what I'm trying to say. There is opportunities. We've had to recruit new engineers to be able to talk to the design engineers in Japan. So there is opportunities. We've got to be obviously cost effective. We haven't won the business, but there is opportunities there, and we're being given it. So that's what I was trying to say to everybody. We've had a great 3 or 4 years, and I just want the train to continue. That's all.
But to keep the train on the tracks.
I think definitely more. Obviously the R&D tax credit on engineering has helped, because it's actually one of the initiatives that's easy to claim. It's very easy to say, we've got so many engineers, we've spent X on this R&D, and you get the tax credit. That's one initiative that's been fantastic for business, I think. It's very clear, the rules, even I'm not an accountant, I can sit down with my accountant and by the penny work out what we're going to get as a credit. So there has been some great initiatives to try and keep it moving. I just hope the government, not just getting bogged down with Brexit for 20 years, really carry on thinking of initiatives to make it easier for innovation to happen, for battery power. We know where cars are going to go. Is it going to, they're going to go in a number of different directions. So I really hope the government carry on with those really clear initiatives so it's easy to say, I'm going to take on another 5 engineers, because they want to get that tax back, and it's a real massive benefit.
So clear, simple initiatives that can be understood and executed on.
Yes, like tooling, make that as part of it. It's hard. I don't know if any in the room are manufacturers, but buying machine tools is great. Getting tooling, getting someone to give you to be able to get tooling for real jobs. You know, funding for it, it's out of cash flow. So real help in tooling. I think carry on with the R&D stuff and real down-to-earth tooling initiatives would really help industry, I think.
Simon?
For me, it's a long-term vision. You know, as Mark said,
we're not talking Brexit here.
No. There's got to be a long-term vision, a long-term strategy, which I know the Automotive Council work on, and it's government then, as mainstream government, actually engaging with that and delivering that. The things such as R&D tax credits, you know, we perhaps almost have to wait every year for a budget to make sure that that's still in play. Do we then stop next year investing in research and development? Do we have to get rid of those 5 engineers we've just taken on? It's that long-term vision to give business the confidence that we can invest in our people, our processes, our plant. As I said, there's massive opportunities for us. We as business owners, as SMEs, have to invest. How much do we have to invest? How much confidence do we have? And government has to give us that strategy that they will adhere to what is being directed by the Automotive Council.
So no surprises, strong and possibly stable, or just strong or stable, you don't mind?
Yeah, but not in a metronome sort of level. It's got to be, this is what we're doing. They obviously said something to Nissan for them to carry on supply of Duke and Qashqai. Let's get that out into the open public so that the business arena can see that, so that we can understand what the government strategy is for the automotive sector.
It almost seems that you're indicating that the government strategy for the sector is a secret only shared with the very largest manufacturers.
I certainly have no idea of it whatsoever at my level. Mark's obviously tenfold my size, and I'd imagine you probably don't either.
I'll keep an eye on that.
If I
Please do.
I'll always answer anything, but I think I'll keep out of that one for a while.
I think we'll steer it back into safer territory under your...
all I can say is that some of the examples of the policies and the financial environment to encourage investment have been extremely transparent for a number of years, and they've been very consistent. So in terms of the approach that's been taken by the government of the day in cooperation with the industry, whether it be corporation tax, R&D tax credits, patent box, all these incentives have been pretty consistent for a number of years, and there is no indication that they are going to change. So it sounds like we've got a communication problem due to make more people aware of what's out there. And one of the roles of my organisation, because of the complexity, is to help people steer their way through this complex area of what the environment is. And even more important, and a couple of the guys have picked it up, is as we move into a kind of devolved English environment. We've just had a mayor elected in the West Midlands and another mayor elected in the North West. With that will come further budgets and funding opportunities for people to go to those particular regions. So again, my organisation is there to help people steer their way through those opportunities and make sure what's available is fit for purpose for their investment.
Sounds like a communication problem there. I'm sure you two can have a chat afterwards outside. Just on the provenance of parts and the content, are manufacturers asking you where parts are coming from? Mark?
To some extent, yes, I think, because...
Have you seen an increase?
Only slightly, because I think at the moment, as we've moved up, to be blunt, you've got to be careful of where you are in the supply chain. As we're moving up to a tier 1, to be honest with you, they're expecting us again to be global supply to each of the key factories with local content. And when you say local content, yes, it really matters more and more that you've got sustained tier 2s and 3s behind you. So we're being asked more and more from the quality side is where are the parts coming from. So yeah, we are starting to see now how sustainable is that growth and where are the parts coming from. I don't think that's not driven by Brexit at all. I think that's already been driven the last couple of years to start to look at local supply and how solid is that supply.
Simon, are you seeing the same?
Very much so. We exhibited at Auto Mechanica not last week, the week before. I would say 80% of the conversations I had with people visiting us on the stands was reference UK content. There was a particular company I spoke to who are a UK assembler of very large volume of product. And their OEM asked them what the UK content of their supply was, and they said 5%. They were rather shocked. So they've got a massive challenge to try and bring themselves into line with what the OEM is demanding of them, because I see that it is being drilled not just from the OEM to the tier 1, they're trying to drill from the tier 1 then down into the tier 2 what their level of UK content is. So at my level, which is always pretty much tier 2, I'm very much seeing that is the rhetoric that's around at the moment, and I think it's real.
Absolutely. Mike, it looked like you were ready to say something there, or did I just...
No, I was listening.
Well, I'm glad to know we all are on such a hot day before we all doze off in the sun. Moving on, slightly different subject, the election, the inconclusive outcome here. We've heard this morning from the industry about a hardline demanding a softer, perhaps, Brexit. Is anybody here encouraged by what perhaps the electorate's shown? Is it that people have voted to say that we maybe have made a mistake and perhaps the country should be more integrated into Europe and a Europe-wide and a global businesses? Anybody thinking that that's a positive? Okay, is anybody thinking anything positive out the election? Mark, this is your opportunity.
As a person, I'm obviously encouraged because I think it was come on, this hard Brexit, are we sure, have we done the right thing? Everyone I talked to, I think even after the Brexit vote was kind of, I got so many questions about what was that article they just said? Oh yeah, we've got to trigger, but we're now in negotiations, we are going to be leaving. Are we going to get free movement of people? So I just was always confused as a voter, how it went down that route with Brexit. And now calling the general election, I think the timing was wrong. And I think clearly people have said, hold on a minute. That's my feeling.
It seems that they've voted economically.
Yeah.
And Simon, you were shaking your head about the idea of perhaps a positive message out of an inconclusive outcome, but you're the one who's seen opportunities in the UK leaving the EU.
Yeah, I see. We've been dealt a hand and we have to transact with what's in front of us. We have to be innovative and we have to do whatever is in front of us. We can't just sit there and do nothing. We'll be out of business. Fact. The election result doesn't help what I want, which is a long-term vision as to what we're trying to do. We're competitive against Europe at the moment. Suddenly, if we have huge increases in corporation tax, we have changes to living wage levels. The issue for living wage for me is why incentivize people to go on apprenticeships to take 4, 5, 6, some people in our business 7 years to get their trade as a tool maker. Why would you penalise yourself for 7 years when you can go and earn £10 an hour being almost unemployable? Sure. So it's things that have, that sort of instability, that sort of question, the fact that we're probably not going to get a budget through. I don't know how we're going to get anything through the House of Parliament at all now. Doesn't help us as business people to actually turn around and say, well, we're going to go with this because we see there's a visibility there.
I think it would perhaps be unfair to bring you in on this, Mike, as we're still in the very early days of establishing what shape or form the current, or perhaps not existing government of the moment takes. But as one of the interfaces between the industry and politics and civil servants, what are you thinking or hearing?
Well, it would be inappropriate, but thank you as a journalist for asking me the question in public.
But I did give you a get-out clause, you will note.
Look, what I'll say is, and a lot of stuff was said this morning and indeed this afternoon about the consequences of where we find ourselves as a result of the election. But my background basically is business and automotive, and the automotive industry is incredibly resilient. And as I said earlier, it competes on a global basis. This isn't the only country that's had a degree of volatility in the last 30 or 40 years in the automotive sector. There are plenty of other jurisdictions around the world who've had their volatility. And whatever happens in the short, medium and long term, given the investment that's gone in by some very significant OEMs, some very significant tier ones, the catalyst that has been set up in terms of the catapults, the research centres, all the stuff that I talked about earlier on, work that's going on autonomous and connected cars, that has already started a momentum that will generate some form of business and some form of opportunity, either to supply people in the UK or to supply people around the world. And I think that's a real opportunity that we can build on. It's not to say that there aren't issues that, the future Brexit discussions and the politics may throw up, but I think the industry is pretty resilient to be able to take those on.
On that note, I think it's time to ask the incredibly resilient members of this industry in the audience if they've got any questions. I see somewhere behind the lights, yes, there is somebody with a microphone. Does anybody have anything that they would like to bring up? Yes, the press.
Press, hello. Kostas Pittas from Reuters. 2 questions. First one for Michael Matthias, I think. 44% is where we are in terms of UK content, but rules of origin mean that some of those parts would not be included in that. They would have been, conceived of in the UK, but then galvanised, painted, etc. abroad. Do you have any sense as to what percentage is actually purely UK components? Mike Hawes was saying it's lower than 44. I wonder if you had a rough number on it. And Mark, I mean, you're not the only person to be quite sceptical about where we are. I interviewed Ralph Spate a few months ago, and he was extremely cynical that we would get above 50% UK content. I wonder, from your perspective, what is the most concerning thing you've heard related to Brexit from a major OEM or supplier in the UK about their thoughts and plans?
Thank you for those questions, Kostas. Perhaps Mike, take the one first. Sorry, Matthias.
Right, no, but to the technical question, the 44% does not constitute the research needed to answer the originating content question. So there are multiple ways, multiple methodologies how you can measure it. And I can only give you a guess, and I don't think that is appropriate, really. I think I may well be faced with a task to do that research in due course. And if so, then we'll publish it. But yeah, really, it would be a guess.
But it is like for like, so the mechanism that was used 3 years ago is exactly the same as this one. So you're getting a true comparison of how it's moved.
Sure, but for WTO rules, this report does not help.
So it's the same as what you see in the reported French and German levels as well.
So when we look at France and Germany, and we look at 60% plus, let's say 60 to 65%, which is perceived to be the upper limit for pretty much any country. We are moving towards that target at a
The
percent.
methodology there with the 44%.
Oh yes, that is
based on-
comparable.
Yeah.
For WTO rules, we would have to do it differently.
Okay, and as the bearer of bad news,
That's not all bad news, you know it's not.
I was going to say that you've been described as the most cynical person on the panel by one of my colleagues. What is that level of cynicism, as Costas asked?
I've got to say it again. I mean, you've interviewed Ralph from JLR. Great success story. Look, we've grown from 60 million to 190 million. We're very happy as investors. And the cynicism comes from not being unsure. Where's it going to go? Where are the car companies really going to invest in the next stage of their new vehicles? It's not next year. It's not the year after. My concern isn't year 3. It's year 5, 6 and 7. Will JLR move more production to Slovakia? Will Ford keep their engine plant here in the UK or move it to Turkey or to Russia or to Spain? So short term, I'm kind of okay. And we've seen that, haven't we, since everyone said, oh, as soon as we vote no to Brexit, the UK is going to collapse. It didn't happen because we're in a car cycle. It doesn't happen that way. We've all got 3, 4, 5 year cycles. My cynicism comes from what's going to really happen in the next after 5, 6 and 7 years.
So not cynicism, but a desire for certainty.
Yeah, because again, we've just somehow managed, the UK as an island has had a great platform for inward investment, growth in automotive. You know, we have an aerospace division, it's the same with Airbus. You know, it's all been so positive, we've now thrown in the uncertainty. So again, I'm not going to sit here and do doom and gloom. I'm looking forward and thinking, what's year 3 and 4 going to look like? Because we've been able to see a long-term journey. It's been very easy for me to phone up my investors in America and say, we've got to spend 10 million on new machines. Great, because the investment has been very, very easy to write. All I'm saying is, we are throwing in a little bit of uncertainty, plus the election, and so we're getting more questions about what's it going to look like in year 5 and 6. So no, not a short-term thing at all, but I am starting to look at what's year 5 and 6 going to look like.
Okay. Is there anybody else? Yes, you, sir, in the front there.
Yes, Jean-Louis Evans of TÜV Sud. I was thinking back 40 years to pre-UK joining the common market. And, you know, the structure of the supply chain back then was characterized by a number of large tier 1 suppliers, many of whom are no longer there. And in the run-up to the election, there was a sense from the Conservative Party that they were considering a more interventionist type of industrial policy. Maybe a bit like the French having, you know, kind of champions. Is that something that you think is possible, feasible in the UK? Is it desirable?
So the question is, the industrial strategy, should it be championing and picking winners?
I'm just wondering, given that in the last 40 years, we're now going back to where we were pre-joining, you know, what was the common market, and the UK has to stand on its own 2 feet much more. Should there be that intervention by government, which in the last 40 years maybe has been less necessary because of the linkages with Europe?
Well, I think the first two to ask that. Do you want government getting involved in your business?
For me, no. I don't think I'm big enough for them to be backing us. I think to a degree they already have done with the OEMs. They have shown that they're willing to support them by way of giving them an environment for investment. You know, Michael obviously been working hard on that, but effectively I think they have championed the OEMs to say that this is the perfect place for them to spend their money. I haven't seen it at tier 1 level, and certainly haven't seen it at my level, and I don't think it would come to my level. I think market forces should play, and just let market forces run and see what happens from that. I don't see that we should be intervening into strategy at that level.
What about you, Mike?
Well, it's a really good question, but I think there are, lots happened in the last 40 years, not least the evolution of the car industry itself in an international sense. And I'm sorry, I'm not sorry, I'm repeating what the Auto Council does in terms of set a framework and a roadmap for development of the automotive sector in this country. And that's about enabling a sector that can compete internationally. That's why all these initiatives have been launched, and it's about their competitiveness. And the other thing is, if you speak to any OEM, they have to make decisions based on choices around the world. So I can't, it's about making sure that any supplier in the UK can respond to that international challenge. Mark quite rightly talked about life cycles. That's been in the car industry forever. Every 5 or 6 years, every plant in the world has to bid, in the world, not just the UK, has to bid for a new product to come in. And the management of that particular plant are competing against management teams in the same company to get that investment to come to the UK or to other countries. So I think the job is to make sure that the environment is absolutely there, that those management teams in the UK can make the best bid possible, so the global HQ, wherever it is in the world, decides to have that product produced here in the UK. And there's very recent evidence that we've got the ability to do that.
Okay, I think there was another question at the back there. Yes.
As we see that the industry has grown, it's obviously we will need to fill it up with sites, with more machinery, with more investment, with so on. So when we're looking at what actually is offered outside of the UK, because we can be okay in the UK, but we're competing with outside of the UK. And when you go to outside of the UK, other governments giving industrial zones, free land, build your factory, training, other helps to the industry. We don't have that in the UK, and we're struggling to find place to grow. So we've got the normal day-to-day issues which Mark was trying to raise, as well as the Brexit or all that, but we are also not competitive with what's been offered within the European Union and within the eastern side, bloc, to manufacturers. And they're coming to us to say, come invest with us, we will give you this, we will give you that, we will give you that. We don't hear that from our own government.
Okay. So the question is, once we're out of Europe, it seems to be, are there opportunities to give more support to the industry on a practical basis? I think that was directed at you, Mike. Yeah. I'm sorry. You seem to be a focus today.
No, fair question. And these investment decisions, company by company, are very complex. It's inappropriate to go into specifics, but what I will say is that, that question is asked to us routinely all the time. And when we explain what's available, what help we can give, working with either local enterprise partnerships, local government and national government, the skills agencies, everybody else, at the end of the day, not because we tell them, but they make a commercial decision to invest in the UK. So there must be a compelling reason for them to do that. So, again, I don't know about your specifics, sir, but more than happy to engage to understand what the particular issue is and see if we can find a way around it.
Okay, well, thank you very much, gentlemen. I think the message out of that is there is the confidence in the UK industry. We just need to unleash it, however that is achieved. As this incredibly resilient audience winds down for the day, I know Mike is keen to say a few words just to finish up, but I think before he does, thank you very much to the panel, and thank you very much for your time.